much, James. I'd be lying to you all if I think my presentation this morning is going to be anywhere near as humorous as yours, but I will try and do my best. It is a fairly dry topic, I have to say. I'm a partner at Levene Accountants, and I jointly head up the Specialist Barristers unit at the practice. We currently act for over 1,600 members of the bar, from pupil barristers to QCs, and we are also an award-winning practice. I haven't got a lot of time this morning, and I just want to cover the key points to do with sources of funding for taking you through your postgraduate studies to becoming a pupil barrister at the bar, and just some key points on when you do hopefully become pupil barristers, things you need to be aware of that will hopefully save you tax going forward. I'm sure all of you are aware at how expensive it is to become a barrister. It's an expensive, high-risk exercise that many of you will undertake, and you do need to be extremely confident at the outset that you have the requisite skills, competence, and obviously what James has been talking about in terms of securing a place through an interview at Chambers. The course fees, I'm sure you're aware, for BPTC is anywhere up to around 19,000, plus you've got your living expenses in London, and also GDL courses between 5,000 and 10,000. There are a combination of sources of funding that are out there, and everything I'm about to impart to you it is in the public domain. You can have a look on the internet. It is all there. The main sources of funding will be through the four inns of court. Hopefully, some of you may have support from your family, which is always helpful. There are commercial loans, but there's not a huge amount of them on the market at the moment. And some chambers, if it's quite a good pupillage award, you can take a drawdown of part of that pupillage award prior to starting as a pupil to fund. It won't fund all of it, but it will fund part of your BPTC costs. There are over about £5 million worth of scholarships that are available through the four inns. Currently, Inner Temple has the largest level of funding, followed by Lincoln's Inn, and then Middle Temple and Gray's Inn have the smallest level of funding for the BPTC and CPE GDL courses. You only have one shot at this, so you need to be confident that the inn that you're picking to apply for a scholarship is the right one. You need to focus on the inn that you're going to have the best chance of success. So you need to do your homework. You do not have to be a member of the inn to apply, but you have to be a member to receive the funding. The inns are looking for, when you apply, it's all based on financial need and merit. So they're looking at on merit, your intellectual ability, your legal research skills, your motivation and evidence of serious commitment to succeed at the bar, your potential as an advocate, mooting, debating and mock trial skills, and your personal qualities, your personality, presentation and integrity, and your financial circumstances and need. There are, just briefly to give you an idea, there are about 100 scholarships that Lincoln's Inn offer between £6,000 and £20,000, so they're not going to cover in full all of your BPTC costs, and they're varying amounts as well, so they are all based, as I've said, on personal need. There are smaller scholarships and smaller awards as well. You need to be aware of the application dates, when you need to get your applications in by, and a key part of this is obviously references that you also need to provide with your application, so it's your responsibility to make sure that they go in on time as well. Bless you. Inner Temple, so they're offering 1.8 million in BPTC and CPE awards. The largest award they offer is 22,000, and they have about 100 awards a year as well, and approximately a much smaller amount, 200,000, is available for the CPE GDL year. They're the only inn to guarantee a CPE GDL scholarship winner an award of at least equal value for their BPTC course without a further interview, so that's worth note. And Middle Temple, the funding's approximately 1.1 million, and £1 million of that funding is for BPTC courses. And it's the same process as the other inns, and they interview all their applicants as well. And Gray's Inn is the smallest with about 900,000. You are able to apply for a career development loan, and that the only participating bank is the Cooperative Bank, and you have to apply through the National Careers Service website. And effectively, the Skills Funding Agency would fund the interest on that loan until you finish while you're studying, and then once you finish studying, you'd have to make repayments on that loan. In terms of your advances on pupillage awards, a number of chambers, if it's a well-funded award, you are able, if you want to take a proportion of that pupillage award as an advance or drawdown. Depending on how that pupillage award is structured, part of that drawdown may be taxable once you commence your self-employed trade as a barrister. So depending on how the pupillage award is structured, generally any award that you receive in your first 6 pupillage is tax-free, so you don't have to pay any tax on that element. Any award that you receive in your second 6 pupillage is taxable. So depending on the proportion of how that award is split over your pupillage, an element of that drawdown will be taxable if it's an advance of part of your second 6 pupillage award. So you do need to be realistic about your skills and potential. As everyone knows here, it's a fiercely competitive market. But from my own experience with my clients, I do know that when they do gain their tenancy and develop their practice, their income does generally go up quite quickly, which is the reward of being a successful barrister. I want to take you on a brief journey, just move you forward slightly to hopefully the point where you're just about to start your second 6 pupillage. So you've got your pupillage. Most barristers in chambers at this point in time trade as a self-employed barrister. There are new rules that have come in that make other vehicles to trade through, such as limited companies, a possibility. But for all of you, it's going to be much more easier and simple and better for you to trade as a self-employed barrister when you start your pupillage at chambers. There are 4 taxes that you need to be aware of. The first tax is Class 2 National Insurance. It's just a flat rate tax, not a huge amount, £2.85 per week, and you pay that once a year when you pay your tax. The second tax is VAT. The key point is that you just have to register for VAT if your fees received exceed £85,000. There are unfortunately a few circumstances where barristers haven't come to see me, haven't appointed an accountant. They've sort of had their head down, done really well, received lots of income and didn't register for VAT when they should have. So it's a huge financial penalty. They have to pay 20% of the VAT over that they should have charged and didn't. So it's a hugely financially punitive mistake to make, and I wouldn't want any of you to do that. So many chambers will get you to register for VAT when you start your second 6. They may leave it until you become a tenant, or they may leave it entirely in your own hands, but you just need to remember that you do need to register for VAT. I won't go into how the whole VAT system works. It's fairly complicated, but it's just an administrative burden when you do have to file quarterly VAT return forms, and you do need to keep documentation of how you've arrived at the figures in the VAT return forms. I would recommend all of you keeping any receipts for any assets that you buy prior to starting your actual pupillage. So if you do have to buy a wig and gown, you buy a laptop, iPad, home office desk chair, and you start using that in your business going forward, you can actually go back 4 years prior to the date of VAT registration and claim back VAT on any assets you've purchased for your business. So definitely worthwhile if you buy a laptop during your BPTC year or just before you start pupillage to keep those receipts. The third and fourth taxes are income tax and Class 4 national insurance. They're 2 separate taxes, but they're both based on the levels of your profits from your self-employed barrister trade. The key each year we prepare self-employed accounts for our clients, and you would need to either do that yourself or get an accountant to do that for you. But that would detail the income that you've received as a barrister. And for most barristers in their earlier years, they are only taxed on income they've actually received payment for. The rules have changed recently, and that basis remains until your income in a particular year exceeds £300,000. So for most of my barristers in the early stages of their career, they're on the cash basis for a while. You then can claim a number of business expenses. You deduct them from your income to arrive at your profit. And I'm just going to quickly run through all the various business expenses you will be able to claim to offset against your income. The main ones invariably will be chambers rent, clerk's fees, contribution, however they structure it at the set that you're hopefully barristers in. Travel can be quite a large cost for some of my barrister clients. Travel from chambers to court, home to court, and court to home is an allowable expense, but travel from your home to chambers is deemed not to be wholly and exclusively for business. There'll be all of your office admin expenses, so if you do incur costs for printing, postage, stationery, computer running expenses, the business use of your mobile phone bills. You can also claim for the business use of your home internet. I had a client that wanted to claim 100% business use for his home internet. So I queried it and said, do you not have any sort of private surfing at all? And he said to me, I do all of that in chambers and I only do my work on the home internet. So that was his explanation. There is all of your professional costs, so there'll be your indemnity insurance, any subscriptions to any professional associations, bar council, data protection, any training and CPD course costs you've incurred subsequent to the commencement of your second six. Unfortunately, any costs you're incurring now for BPTC, GDL, CPE, you cannot claim them as a business expense going forward. Court attire, a wig and gown, you can claim for the cost of that, collars, cuffs and bands, but suits, shirts, shoes that barristers invariably purchase for their business unfortunately don't fall within the definition of wholly and exclusively. There's not many cases I know, but there's one, Malaloo versus Drummond, and it was found that there was a duality of purpose to the court attire. It kept the female barrister warm, decent and clothed, so they disallow it. You can't claim it as a business expense. There will be subsistence costs, occasional snacks if you're working unsociable hours, so not your breakfast, lunch or dinner, but if you've had to get up early to get to court and you've grabbed a coffee and a croissant on the way in or a snack on the way back, those are the sorts of costs you can claim. And then if you incur bank charges, bank interest on any accounts. There'll be sundry expenses. You might buy a wheelie bag for files, folders, home office desk lamp, those sorts of costs. So you'll have your income, less all of your various business expenses should hopefully give a profit. If it doesn't, you might want to think of another profession to pursue. Deducted from that figure is your tax-free personal allowance for the year, which currently is £11,500. And then any profits from £11,500 up to £45,000 are taxed at basic rate 20%. Anything up to £150,000 is taxed at 40%, and then you've got the higher rate above that at 45%. You also start losing your tax-free personal allowance once your profits are over £100,000 a year, which is a nice problem to have. But once your profits are at £123,000, you've totally lost your tax-free personal allowance. On top of that, you have to pay your Class 4 national insurance contributions, which are 9% on profits from just over $8,200 to $45,000, and anything above that is taxed at 2%. And on top of that, if you do have any outstanding university student loans, you also have to make a one-off student loan repayment each January when you pay your tax, and that's currently about 9% on profits. Just over 17,000, or for many of you it will be profits over 21,000. The key point out of all of this is when you are a barrister, you need to put money aside for tax as you earn it. That's the golden rule. For most barristers, an average barrister in their first year, you need to be putting away at least 20% of your receipts into a separate interest-bearing account for tax. We can do everything for you if you don't keep proper records, which I'm not saying you should do. We can put the accounts together, but we won't pay your tax. So that's the key point. You need to put money aside for tax. And the first time you ever pay tax, you actually have to pay 150% of the liability. You have to pay for your whole first year, and then you have to make a payment on account, which is half of that year's liability, for the following year. So the first time you do pay tax, you pay 150% of the liability, and then you pay another 50% in the July. And then the 2 payments on account you make come off the following year's liability. The other points to note as well are you won't have the benefits that many of your friends will have in employed positions. So if you're ever in the unfortunate event of being too sick, or you have an accident to work, then you do need to think about things like income protection. Pension contributions are really important as well. They save you tax, and you receive tax relief when you put money into a pension. So they're key things that you'll need to think about when you start as barristers. Conscious of the time, I do want to open the floor to any questions that you might have. Just want to point out that Levene do offer a first year free offer, so we will do your first set of accounts and first tax return at no cost. You get to see how we work, level of service, and it's a good start that you don't have to pay accountancy fees when you first get on your feet. I'd like to thank you for your time this morning, and open the floor to any questions that you might have. Burning questions about interviews, or even more exciting, tax. Well, that unfortunately, I'm just the messenger. Please don't shoot the messenger. It's obviously the government that sets the tax rates. So if you think about it, when you receive your fee, you're paying. Initially you need to be putting away 20% for tax. As my clients' incomes go up, that can go up to 40, 42, 45%. Plus you're paying your chamber's costs, which can be up to 20% of your income. So you might be left with 40% at the end of the day if you're lucky. I hope that answered the question.
Can I just add, in terms of sources of income, from a provider perspective, the big 2 providers, City and BPP, both have scholarship pots of about £500,000 now. So some people will pick up, say, 5,000 from BPP and 10,000 from the Inns. So you get 2 sources of scholarship there. And the other thing is that most providers now offer the BPTC as an LLM, or there's an LLM extension. And the advantage of that is that you can get a government loan for an LLM of 10,000. I know it's more student debt, but you only repay it once you're earning. And I know BPP does, and I think maybe others, have their own companies that we underwrite loans for our students. So if you come through, I think we do it at Future Finance, they're not necessarily the absolute best rates, but they will loan more generously to who they decide to loan to, on the basis that BPP underwrites the loan. So if you default, we pay up, not you. And because that takes the risk away from Future Finance, they lend when other providers might not. Okay. So just a little bit of an extension. A little bit more ways to cut the cake a bit.
Thank you.
Yes. So look, I think you have 1,400 students or so nationally, and about half those are international. So, and they tend to, a lot of the scholarship schemes will not apply to international students. So you've got 700 or so people competing for the, how many millions from the Inns?
5 million.
5 million. So there's quite a lot going around. I would say, I'm trying to think as a rule of thumb, something like a third of students domestically will pick up funding through the Inns and or through providers. I'm slightly, I don't quote me on that, but that would be my sense of it. If you have a scholarship from an Inn to put on your CV, it's a big help. It means that, I mean, obviously the Inns use barristers to do the interviewing, and they'll give a scholarship to students that they think might succeed in a pupillage interview. So it's a sort of, it's almost as if one pupillage interview has already taken place and someone's already said that person looks good for pupillage. Otherwise they probably wouldn't award. So it's a very useful thing to have on the CV that you got an award from the Inns. It's not the end of the world if you don't. We occasionally get students who come to us at BPP and say, I'd really thought the Inns would offer, and we re-interview and go, the Inns had a bad moment, they must have lost their marbles, you're great, and we've made an award, and at least that's something that they've got to provide a scholarship, and have gone on and done brilliantly. So it's not the end of the world, but it's a really good first indicator of how the bar reacts to you, is how you do in your Inns scholarship award interview. And it's worth having a mock interview. Most providers, if you signed up and committed early in the application process to go to that provider will offer you a mock interview for an Inns award, let alone a pupillage one, because it's a really important interview to get right. And mock interviews, particularly if you get them to record you and you can watch your interview back and get the feedback all recorded, which some providers will do. We'll do that at BPP. That's an important thing. You do get occasionally students say, I've decided to give up because that I didn't get an Inns award. And I think it's very cautious, but it's a fairly important first indicator of how you're getting on.
What sort of costs can you expect in your first year of Pupillage? Do you have to contribute to the cost of the chambers, apart from paying for the taxes as well?
Generally, most chambers will give pupil barristers a break from having to pay any rent or chambers costs in at least during pupillage, and some chambers, generally it kicks in once you become a tenant, but some chambers will extend that break a bit longer, so you will be receiving income generally before you have to start shelling out for any significant costs. The main costs initially is really just, there'll be a bit of, you'll need obviously suits and a laptop and a bit of and the wig and gown. So there's those initial costs, and then it's really just a lot of it is travel. Travel can be a really large cost for my barrister clients when they're being sent all over the country to various courts. They're having to pay for that travel themselves, even if it is subsequently being reimbursed to them. There's going to be a time lag before they get that paid back. So that's really it's those initial costs. The tax, you don't actually have to pay until a year and a half after you've actually started to trade. So you will have earned all of the money before you actually have to pay the tax.
I'm going to have to stop you there, I'm afraid, because we're out of time. Would you just say thank you very much to James and Mason?
Thank you.